Picture this. May 1st, 2004. The map of Europe literally changes overnight. The European Union welcomes 10 new countries in its biggest expansion ever. It was this incredible moment of optimism, celebrating a continent that was finally reunified. But behind all the celebrations, one of the biggest economic experiments in modern history was just getting started.
So, that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. What actually happens when a group of relatively poor countries, still shaking off the dust of Soviet-era economics, joins a huge, wealthy club like the EU? Is just getting that membership card an automatic ticket to prosperity? Does it guarantee you'll catch up?
Okay, let's really get into this. To understand why this was such a big deal, you have to appreciate the sheer scale of the challenge. This was not just another routine expansion. The economic situation of these new members made it something the EU had never, ever dealt with before.
So first off, you have to remember where these countries were coming from. They were all clawing their way out of what economists call a transition recession. And trust me, this wasn't your garden variety downturn. This was a deep, traumatic shock from completely dismantling their old planned economies and trying to build market-based ones from scratch. They were still deep in recovery mode when they came knocking on the EU's door.
And this slide, wow, it really puts that wealth gap into perspective. So if we set the average income for the whole newly expanded EU at 100, the original 15 members were already ahead at 109. But then look at the new guys. Poland was way down at 46, less than half the average, and Latvia was at just 41. The economic distance between the old and new members was just enormous.
So the key takeaway here? This was absolutely not a merger of equals. It created the biggest economic divide the EU had ever tried to bridge. And the research we're digging into today is all about answering that one massive question. Could they actually close that gap?
All right, so one of the first really big takeaways from all this research is that the whole experience was, well, completely lopsided. Economists call this asymmetric, but what it really means is that joining the EU hit the old members and the new members in totally different ways.
Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine a tiny little tugboat tying itself to a colossal aircraft carrier. For that tugboat, everything changes, right? It gets pulled in a new direction, tossed around by the carrier's massive wake. But for the aircraft carrier, it barely even feels a nudge. That is exactly what happened here. For the new members, it was a profound shock that forced huge, painful changes. For the existing EU, the overall economic impact was basically negligible.
But wait, it gets even more interesting. Because these new countries weren't just one big, identical block. They didn't all react the same way at all. Because of their unique industrial histories, many of them inherited from the Soviet era, each one ended up carving out a very different path for itself within the huge EU market.
So let's take Poland, for example. You can see from this chart that its economy was really built on its industrial past. We're talking heavy, labor-intensive stuff. Steel, coal, furniture, clothing. That was their starting point.
Okay, now look at the Baltic states, a completely different story, right? Their strategy was to specialize in very specific commodities, things like refined oil, wood products, and agricultural goods you can't eat, a totally different economic DNA compared to Poland.
And then you've got Hungary, which took a whole other route. It really leaned into high-tech manufacturing, focusing on things like computers, consumer electronics, and car engines. So right there you have three distinct regions, all telling three very different stories of how they tried to adapt.
So you can see these countries are all scrambling to find their place. But, this road to catching up, it was incredibly bumpy. They hit some major roadblocks along the way.
And just to give you a sense of how serious these problems were, get this. In 2003, the Czech Republic's public deficit exploded to 13% of its entire GDP. That's not just a warning light, that's a full-blown crisis alarm going off.
And that crisis was just the tip of the iceberg. The research really points to three main hurdles these countries had to overcome. First, you had those fiscal crises, where government spending was just out of control. Second, you had this problem called twin deficits, where the government spends so much it causes the whole country to start importing way more than it exports. And third, their economies just weren't moving in sync with the rest of Europe.
And that third one, the unsynced business cycles, sounds a bit technical, but it's super important. Think of it like this. For a currency union like the euro to work smoothly, you need all the economies to be dancing to roughly the same beat, booming together, slowing down together. If they're not, That one-size-fits-all interest rate from the central bank can actually cause big problems for some countries.
Okay, so after all this, the adaptation, the crises, the bumpy road, what's the big takeaway? What did we actually learn from this massive economic experiment about how poorer countries can catch up to richer ones?
Well, the biggest lesson is a really powerful one, and maybe a little sobering. Simply joining the club, even with all the market access and development money that came with it, was not a magic wand. It didn't automatically make anyone prosperous.
So if just joining isn't enough, what is? Well, the research points to a fascinating case study. Ireland. For a long time, Ireland was in the EU, but its economy was stuck in a rut. Then, around the mid-80s, it made a huge shift in its own internal policies. It embraced, and I'm quoting here, free trade, low taxes, low public spending, and competition-oriented policies. And the result? Ireland went from being a poor member to one of the absolute wealthiest.
And that really leaves us with a final, thought-provoking question that sums this all up. When it comes to real, sustainable economic success, what matters more, joining the right club or putting in the hard work to get your own house in order?